Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome back to Fallout 76 for our weekly trip to Mama Mumble's discount den of disappointment, where we're going to burn through 1,000 scrip on legendary weapons. Today, we're going to do a little bit of a mix of ranged and melee weapons. I'm just going to do a couple rolls for melee weapons, just for a little bit of variety, and that'll give us a little something to mix things up. As always, if you like videos like this and you want to see more, do go ahead and subscribe, hit the like button, leave a comment. There's always a lot more to come on the channel. And for the record, I am going to continue doing script videos after the new legendary crafting system comes out. I may mix it up a little bit and occasionally do some crafting and occasionally do some script, but we're still going to continue these. I think they're a good opportunity to talk about things, and people do seem to learn from them, so we're going to keep it up. All right, without further ado, let's head on inside and see what the Purveyor has for us today. And our first roll of the day is a melee weapon, and it's a dud. It's a hunter's guitar sword with faster swing speed and 40% less damage while power attacking. So let's start with the good. The faster swing speed is always good on melee weapons. Personally, I feel that that is more important than even most of the primary effects. It flat out boosts your DPS in a dramatic way because you can swing it a lot faster, so that's a good thing. Taking less damage while power attacking, that's not a bad thing to have. It does certainly help, I suppose, but it is a very brief period. It's a very small window where that's open, so I'm not totally in love with that effect. The hunter's effect is a situational one, extra damage to animals. We know at this point that after the next update, that's going to get a buff to 50%. There have been people asking for it to go higher, but at this point, I'm betting that ship has sailed and it's going to roll at 50%. So it's a nice buff to have. Unfortunately, Hunters just isn't an effect that most people are really interested in, and ultimately, nobody's really interested in it on a guitar sword. It's just not one of the more desirable weapons in the game. It makes noise. You can't really sneak with it. It's just not a great one. So sadly, not a winner there. Let's try a ranged weapon. And this one's not a great one either. So here we've got the Berserker's single action revolver with bashing damage and faster movement speed while aiming. The Berserker's effect in the next update is also going to get a buff. Currently, if you're wearing armor or you have any damage resistance, you actually take a negative hit to your damage with a Berserker's weapon. That part of the effect is going to go away, and that's a welcome change. I would still really like to see them buff it more. A 50% overall damage buff isn't really worth it for Berserkers. It is much easier to stay alive with Bloodied than it is with Berserkers, and with Bloodied you get a lot more damage from the effect, and you have other things that it synergizes with. With Berserkers, you don't really have that, so I do think it deserves a bigger buff than that. Next up, we've got bashing damage, which is also getting an increase from 40% to 50%. Unfortunately, it's still going to be useless in almost every situation unless you've got a shredding minigun or you are the 1 in 100,000 players who have chosen to build around stabbing things with a bayonet. So yeah, sadly, not much fun there. Let's try another one here. We've got a Medic's Gauss shotgun with VATS critical shots healing our group and VATS critical shots doing more damage. It also has 50 damage resistance while aiming. So while I'm not a huge fan of the Medic's effect, that's not because it's a bad effect. It seems to do what it's supposed to do. It works okay. Could probably use a little bit of a buff to the healing that it gives. But the problem with it isn't how it works. It's just the fact that there isn't really a scenario in Fallout 76 where it's particularly useful. There just aren't. You don't have teams building around different roles like medic or support versus high damage builds and so on. So that's just not really how people play Fallout 76. So the effect is it's just kind of lost. VATS critical shots doing more damage is definitely good, especially on a weapon like this, where if you're built for something like this, you likely have some VATS critical perks in your build. So that's really good. And the VATS critical damage perk and the medics perk really do synergize well together. So if you are playing that role, if you, for some reason you are, or you just want to get the most out of a weapon like this, being able to heal and get extra damage on a VATS critical, those two perks synergize very well together. The 50 damage resistance while aiming, I guess it's a little bit helpful, but if you're using the first two perks, you're not really going to get anything out of it because it doesn't trigger while you are in VATS. So it's not really giving you anything. And on top of that, damage resistance has such diminishing returns anyway that probably not going to get a whole lot of mileage out of that. But if you want to run a medic build, and there are people who do it, I'm not sure how necessary it is, but there are people who do it, then that's not a bad one to do it with. Now here we've got another melee weapon, Hunter's Revolutionary Sword with swing speed and 90% reduced weight. The Hunter's effect sadly is not any more useful on this weapon than it was on the first one. Swing speed is still good. 90% reduced weight is one of my favorite perks to get on a melee weapon, just because it makes it a little bit easier to maybe keep it as sort of a backup for almost any character. Heavy gunners in particular can get a little bit of mileage out of that because they've got high strength in their builds already. So even if you don't have melee perks, you can still do pretty decent damage. So having something that has faster swing speed and 90% reduced weight, just something to break out in low level areas or for, easy events with squishy enemies kind of thing, that can be useful. Unfortunately, the Hunter's effect, again, just isn't very useful. So let's move along. And now we've got something good. Okay, finally, thank you. It's been a few weeks here, Mama Mumbles. I was starting to wonder if you were getting a little angry at old man McRib, but looks like you're throwing me something half decent here. So what we've got here is a Furious Fixer with 10% damage while aiming and faster movement speed while aiming. So let's break this one down a little bit and talk about why I think this is a pretty solid roll. So the Fixer, you inherently have two benefits to it, to every Fixer. Improved stealth, basically harder to detect while sneaking, that stacks on top of your other sneak buffs. Faster sneaking movement speed, that sadly doesn't really work for most players. If you are a lower level player and you don't have the speed demon mutation, then you will notice faster speed with this weapon. But if you do have it, you're really not going to get anything out of that. Now, where this weapon gets interesting is how things synergize together. So the next perk is Furious. With Furious, we get increased damage after every hit on the same target. Basically, it's a small buff to each one, and that's going to boost your damage up. So if you can get over 5 shots, I think it's over 5 shots on a target, then you're maxing that out. 10% damage while aiming is going to get a buff to 25% damage while aiming. That's important. Faster movement speed while aiming. It has been clarified for me multiple times in the comments on these videos now, and I did confirm it to make sure it was accurate. And much like the sneaking movement speed, faster movement speed while aiming, if you have the speed demon mutation, you are not going to notice a difference there. If you don't, then you will. So let's talk about why it's good. Furious effect and 10% damage while aiming. So what we're going to get here is a weapon that is really designed for free aim, not so much for VATS. If you're doing free aim with a weapon, you are primarily going to be targeting center mass, torso shots. You're not going to be getting damage bonuses from hitting the head or weak points unless they happen to be the torso. So you are going to be putting more shots on your target, so you will take advantage of the Furious effect. Adding 10% damage while aiming means that you'll get another buff on top of that. So you get a little something that's going to help you with the squishier enemies, and then the Furious effect will kick in to help you with tougher, tankier enemies. So those things synergize really well. If you're a lower level player and you have a weapon like this, faster movement speed while aiming is kind of nice to have. And then faster sneaking movement speed means when you're not aiming, you're still moving a little bit quicker, even though you're being stealthy. So again, those two things synergize really well together. So that's really an interesting role. We'll take a look at that in the future. And next up, we've got an Assassin Ski Sword. So this, for anybody that wonders why I don't roll melee weapons a lot, this is why. they're just not good. Legendary effects on melee weapons, there just aren't a lot of good ones. So it makes for a lot of garbage to go through. It's harder to find anything interesting or kind of niche about certain weapons like this. So an assassin's ski sword, extra damage to humans, will be getting a buff to 50%. Reflects melee damage back while blocking. Who cares? Nobody blocks. 40% less damage while power attacking. That's not a bad thing to have, but again, small window of time. I don't know how much mileage you're really going to get out of that. You know, if that were, say, 90% reduced weight instead, and you had faster swing speed or more damage while power attacking, and you had assassins, then this becomes a weapon that maybe a heavy gunner can keep as a backup and pull out when you get cultists or blood eagles in your daily op, and they're the resilient ones that you have to kill with a melee attack. So you can, instead of running in with a heavy gun and shooting and then gun bashing, you can just bring something like this and still probably do quite well. But sadly, it doesn't have those second and third stars, so this one is destined for the Scrip bin. Let's see what we've got next. And it's an assassin's fat man with VATS critical shots doing more damage and extra perception. So here's another one that, you know, could be a fun, occasional use kind of weapon if it was 90% reduced weight. The assassin's effect, not super useful in most circumstances, but it will get that 50% buff. Here's where this could be fun. If it was 90% reduced weight and it didn't weigh much and you just carried a few mini nukes around with you, when you encounter those small Blood Eagle or cultist camps, this would be the weapon you can pull out and you can just nuke every enemy in it. Or you find those, 3 Brotherhood recruits that are walking around tightly packed together. Yeah, you'd be able to knock them all right out with something like this, which is cool. But at 20 pounds, you're not going to do that. You're going to send this back to the Scrip bin, as I am, because it's just too heavy for occasional use. The Fat Man is just not that reliable in VATS. The way explosive damage works in Fallout 76 is very hit or miss, if you will. So, yeah, just not a great one, and definitely not worth 20 pounds in the stash. Let's see what's next. Now we've got a bloodied Cryolator with VATS critical shots, again doing more damage and extra perception. So, the bloodied effect here, bloodied effect is normally a great one to get. On the Cryolator, I'm less in love with it. On a Cryolator, you have a very specific purpose for a weapon like this. You want to freeze enemies in place so that your teammates or other people can take them out, doing higher damage. So things like the Scorch Beast Queen, things like the Imposter Sheep Squatch, even things like bosses in daily ops, especially the new decryption ones where they penetrate all your armor and can actually kill you for once. This is a weapon that can give you an advantage there in a team or public event setting. The ideal effect to get on this, of course, is quad. That way you don't have to stop and reload and you can keep your enemies frozen longer. Alternatively, something like vampires to keep you alive, or even medics to give you some health back and give your teammates some health back. That can be interesting there. 90% reduced weight makes it a little easier to carry around. Unfortunately, we don't have any of those effects on this. So this one, these effects on any number of other weapons would be amazing. But on this one, it's just not doing a whole lot for us. Now, one alternative to that is if you're into PvP and you want to use this in PvP. The Cryolator does seem to be pretty useful for PvP. Players don't really have any major resistance to cold weapons, so that definitely helps. And then, of course, slowing them down and freezing them in place does make them die fairly easy. Players don't have huge health pools, so taking them out with a weapon like this is not that hard. So if you're into PvP, this could be useful for you there, but the vast majority of players are not into PvP, so probably not the best Cryolator we can get. Let's try another melee weapon, and it's another piece of crap. So, Suppressor's Chinese Officer Sword with faster swing speed and 90% reduced weight. So, the Suppressor's effect, kind of like the Medic's effect. There's nothing wrong with it. It works fine. It does what it's supposed to do. And you might even think it would be useful a little bit, but unfortunately, it's really not. You're going to want a better effect than this. The best defense in Fallout 76 is good offense. You want to kill things that threaten you as quickly as humanly possible, rather than simply reducing their damage output. So, I mean, it's better than not having anything, but it's not that helpful. Faster swing speed definitely makes it a more useful weapon. Reduced weight makes it much easier to carry around, but it's just not very good. And finally, we're going to wrap things up with a Troubleshooter's Gatling Plasma. So this one is kind of interesting. What we have here are a few effects. The first one, the Troubleshooter's effect, is going to get a buff just like all the other Slayer type effects to 50%. Troubleshooters is a more useful one of those effects than most of them. You've got a lot of events that involve robots. You've got different things on the map you're going to do that involve robots. Anything from encrypted to nuke silos to AWOL armaments. There's lots of scenarios that you can plan for where you're going to use a weapon against robots. In addition to that, it's got the 10% damage while aiming, which is going to get a buff to 25%. And because it's a heavy gun, you're not likely to use it in VATS, so you will likely be aiming it. So essentially what you have here is a weapon that does an extra 25% damage to everything and an extra 50% damage to robots. So this is more useful than it initially seems. Unfortunately, that damage while aiming and the damage to robots, they are the additive damage. So it's not as great as it could be if we went back in time and had our multiplicative damage scale back. But that combination is kind of intriguing. On a heavy gun, I think 25% damage while aiming is going to become a lot more desirable. Now that one, of course, also had a VATS perk on it, which is fairly useless on heavy guns, but I think that was a pretty good one. Let's see if we get our perfectly preserved pie, and sadly, no. Looks like our luck all got spent on that Furious Fixer, which I can accept that for today. After a few weeks of absolutely terrible rolls, getting one really good one is pretty good. So that, ladies and gentlemen, is going to bring this one to a close. As always, if you enjoyed it and you want to see more, do go ahead and subscribe, hit the like button, leave a comment. There's always a lot more to come on the channel, and I hope I see all of you next time.